All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, April 9th. Little bit of a pullback today, which I think is really expected at this point. As we know, markets don't go up in a straight line for the most part. Same thing with going down. Usually, right? I mean, we're talking 80% of the time. They just don't really go down in a straight line, go up in a straight line. So, I think that digestion is really kind of what we have. And after several really nice weeks. So this is what I wrote last night in private Twitter. I just talked about, I said, hey, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think the indices have really gotten a little bit stretched. The RSI for the Qs yesterday, I think, was a 74. If you're not familiar with that study, the Relative Strength Index, for me, what I use that for a couple different things, but especially for the indices and sectors, both the major indices, S&P, Qs, IWM, as well as sectors, when they really get overbought or oversold, usually they revert a little bit. They just normally stay within the lines between 30 to 70, but when they start to really move above that upper line, you can see I'm down here on the right, and that's what we saw for the Q. The Qs were a 74 yesterday. You could see the RSI will actually turn a little bit red once it goes outside of the barriers, but it's still a 72. Sorry, it's still a, what does it say? Is it a 70? Yeah, 70 it closed out for IWM. So still on the fringe of being overbought. Notice the last time that we were overbought, we probably got to close to an 80 RSI in the Qs. And then we kind of gave back a bit, right? This was where we got a bit extended, and then we kind of took off. So the one thing that I noticed yesterday, kind of at the end of the day, so I didn't really give anybody a major heads up during the session yesterday, but more after hours and then also this morning, is just whenever and you could see from what I wrote last night. Right, here's the chart that I mentioned. Look at the distance between the 5-period exponential moving average, which is the yellow line of my charts. I may have gone over this in yesterday's video. I can't remember now. And also the 20-period moving average, right? For the 5 and the 20. So when these things when there becomes like a pretty decent width between the two, usually you see kind of a little bit of a check back. And that's kind of what I'm playing for now. So if we go back to the live chart, SPY could come in a decent amount more, before we could say that we really had a pullback. So just be aware of that, and try to position yourself appropriately for that now that we're kind of losing steam. Now, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. We could be up tomorrow too. But I would rather err on the conservative side when I see that 5-period way above the 20, because you just don't see too often. If you go back and just look at similar time frames, you don't see the 5. Like if you go back to the September, right, when we were rallying, right, whenever it gets extended, it normally comes in. All right, so if we could even go back a little bit further, but here, look at how far the 5 gets above the 20, and then we usually come back. Now sometimes we do this, but it's kind of more rare. Usually that yellow line at some point will come in to kind of, if not touch the 20, at least it gets close. Notice the last, since the beginning of the year, we've come in and we didn't even touch here, and same thing here. So they haven't crossed. So you want to be aware of that, of course. That would be a bear signal when the one moving average crosses underneath the other one. But we haven't been close to that all year long. And at this point, what I'm looking for is just basically a check back. Right, and we could look at that with S&P futures. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. And I talked about being more of a net seller today. I mean, I got a little bit lucky this morning. Some of my positions, swing trade positions that I've had on, I was able to really kind of hit some targets. Coop was one name that I started adding to last week. I still think I'm holding the last piece because I think it can get to value area high, which is 95.75. But it was nice to be able to, I added into weakness a couple days for Coop. Okta, I'm completely out of. Geez, what a nice candle. That really closed on the highs. Sometimes you stop watching them once you get out of them. Oh, I think I did the right thing. I think I got out of this somewhere in here. We just never gave back any of the early gains like most stocks did this morning. But look at that thing. So this one again kind of alerted me to the fact when we saw some calls into here into support, and that's kind of how I use option activity. I don't really like to chase when we see, which is a good majority of the option activity that's on the tape, is after a name's already up decently. But this Okta calls, once we first saw them, the stock wasn't doing anything. So to me, that's sometimes when I will go ahead and play a name. I'll give you another example of one today that we played today for a day trade, which was TPX. This is Tempur-Pedic. Do I really want to own this name for any more than a day trade? Probably not. Maybe a tiny piece. Again, not a lot of conviction for me in Tempur-Pedic. But when they come in and buy calls in this name pretty aggressively, and I got out of this one right around. Oh, geez, look at this thing come all the way back in. So that's why you take targets. But look at this thing, and I was able to get out. Last target I think was $3 and got in at 240 or something like that. They still have. There's a Virgin point of control up here, and I'm sorry, I'm just holding one. What am I holding? One call left. I think I'm just holding one. But there is a Virgin point of control up here. But I liked. First thing I saw was the 1 hour chart that said. So this, when I see something like this, where it's a name trying to break out of a high congestion zone or range, and we see option activity like not up here, but when we see option activity like right in here, I say, oh, it's got a chance to really go. So that worked out well and for a day trade. So I do things like that when I don't really want to add a lot of swing trades on. When I don't think it's a great time or place to do it, I'll day trade a little bit more. Another trade that I thought was interesting for the day was Hula. This is a name that's gotten pretty beaten up. Even when China was rallying, it just underperformed. So finally someone came in today and said maybe that was enough. It didn't really move off of the calls, but you could see I kind of like it in here, provided that it holds. And I think this is a name rather than, they bought short-term calls. I don't know why they're buying short-term calls. I would just rather own stock for a swing. But you could see this is where they bought the calls. It failed to get into value and then trickled down. So let's go ahead and look at the indices, and we'll just talk a little bit more about them because volatility, the VIX finished up 8% today to 1428. And when that happens, when the VIX rises, more stocks tend to move together, so we can spend a little bit more time. By the way, the value area is doing everything, telling us basically everything that we needed for the day. If you go to the 1 hour chart, what I said was watch 2888. It's a real easy level to remember. And we did not hold that this morning. And once we fall into value, it becomes a mess until we can get back above. You could see here we try to get back above. So again, if I say that on the private Twitter that, hey, watch this 2828 level, and we break into it, it's kind of going to be a mess thereafter, right? If it holds, then it's business as usual, but if not, it's usually a mess. But interesting, try to rally back a couple times today and just failed. So we're kind of back into this support. Remember, by the way, I talked about this Virgin point of control being taken out and a good place to take profits. So, notice that sometimes we do try to overcome it and fail. So this was a great place. Now, you would have had to sit on your hands if you took off all your risk, which I did not do, while the market was trying to retake it. But so the positive for the day is that a lot of these virgin point of controls on the downside, not all of them, but there was a couple taken out. There was one on the 5-minute. By the way, crazy price action at the end of the session today. The reason why that happens, I know some people like to say, oh, it's the algos. People are executing a lot of orders at the end of the day, and it becomes a little bit of a tug of war. You know, if somebody has a big order to sell, usually, again, the volume, if they're doing, if there's a big trade to be done, a lot of people will actually, you know, try to use that volume at the end of the day. Remember, the beginning of the day and the end of the day is the most amount of volume. So sometimes people are also benchmarked to the close. So sometimes they really kind of force an order in at the end of the day, trying to actually beat the close. That happens a lot. So that could just be one person's order where they were doing a sell, and maybe somebody else was buying. Could be the reason, or maybe they jammed it a little bit too much on this. I used to do that type of trading, end of day trading, where I was benchmarked to the close, as many portfolio managers, not portfolio managers, portfolio trading desks. A lot of times mutual funds, all they care about is make sure that you get the closing print, but if you can improve upon it, so you really kind of do some crazy things at the end of the day to try to beat the close. But that's a big thing. So it's not so much, now they are executing, and I was executing using algos, but it's not like predatory algos. You're just using algos to try to really execute a lot of orders in a small amount of time. Through, you know, like a basket order technology. And that all happens in trading systems these days. So anyway, that's the Qs. IWM, different picture. So IWM also took out one of these virgin point of controls, and kind of interesting. You know, here was let's go back to the Qs on the 5-minute. I thought this was also interesting too, and I tweeted this out on the private Twitter saying, look, we just can't get outside of value, and we tried doing that several times. And just could not do it on the top of value. Let's go to IWM. IWM again continues to be the weak spot. Last week it outperformed a little bit, but again, this was another good one. Using the value areas, we rose right up to this. Notice we did not take out this virgin point of control, which was bothering me. We came so close to it at 10:50 in the morning. We did not take it out. We had a weak bounce right into the bottom of value, and then that was basically it for the day. So again, if you're really disciplined and you're scalping, using the value areas can really give you some great setups. And then notice that we did not bounce off this virgin point of control. We actually kept going down, which is not always the best sign. It looks like we found support back here. Let's just see what the 1 hour looks like. Yeah, the 1 hour we also fell. We were holding value for the most of the day, but we fell in there too. Which kind of tells me, if we go into, I don't think any of these held. Qs is now in value. SPY's also in value. So all three of these started the week above value on the 1 hour bar. We're now in value for all three. So it's kind of a question mark. I think what we do for the rest of the week. And if I have a big question mark in my head, what do? I try to have a little bit less risk on. So I talked about a couple winners: Coop, Okta, the one that we traded for TPX. I also got stopped out in a name today too. I like to make sure that I'm covering those. SE, which actually hung in there, but this is my stop all along. So why did I take a stop here? Well, first of all, I always define my stops on entry, but it's having a tough time here, and I'm afraid that this thing is going to slip down to 20. I think that could happen pretty easily if it breaks this low. So kind of a preemptive stop, but I think the whole time I said my stop was going to be around 22, and I kind of just let it go a little bit. I relaxed the stop, which probably you shouldn't do. But I did not own that big of a position. I only owned a couple hundred shares in this one. So, but anyway, that one's gone. ZS was a name that we added yesterday. I just had a little bit of a tough time going today because of everything that was on the tape today, but still finished up 2.3%. Let's see if it can reclaim the moving averages tomorrow. A couple other names. I noticed that there was a little bit of strength out of the medical devices, medical equipment space. I added a small trade on EW today. This is a name that I've been watching for a while. I'm looking for this to do like a pre-earnings type trade. So that one's 197.88 is basically where I think it could possibly get to. But there is a few other names that showed some signs of life. ISRG ended up on the day. Another one that I traded a couple weeks ago, Tandem. I actually got stopped on this one, on this red candle, because it broke this range, but it's been fighting back since then. So I don't have anything on in this one. Like I said, I stopped myself out on this one. Yeah, it was about a week and a half ago, I think that happened. What else in terms of option activity? I think MRVL closed on the highs today. I know that was mentioned on the CNBC halftime show. A few other trades that we saw today. Apple in the beginning of the day. A lot of this really kind of trailed off. So this is sometimes how it works with option activity, is that you'll see buyers and the buyers will just kind of go away. They end up being wrong. And a lot of times they're just scalping too. Like a lot of the Apple was this week's, they're weekly stuff. These are mostly momentum players. Netflix was another momentum player, weekly calls. I'll tell you, Netflix, it was another great one to watch on with the value areas. Notice where do we stop at? Right at the version point of control. And then, that was basically it for the day. All right, so that's it for the day. I mean, best thing I could say is just to kind of have a little bit of patience and let this, I do think, even though I don't have a crystal ball and so forth, but I would not be surprised if we start the day down again tomorrow. And then we'll see if buyers come with that, entices the buyers. But who knows? But like I said, I'm kind of just sticking to my plan and just realizing that, these moving averages need to come a little bit closer. And for that to happen, price needs to get a little bit lower. I think also with that IWM underperforming, kind of gives you a little bit of a sign that there's some sellers in there. Also, the buyback plans. I know everybody's been talking about that, but it is what it is. The buyback plans a lot of them are off in names that are not reporting, or the names that will be reporting in the next couple weeks. So that doesn't give the underlying bid to the market. There's some truth to that. I don't think that's all complete conspiracy theory. I think that does have a little bit of an effect. So that's it for today, and we'll bring it back tomorrow morning. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.